As a writer, it's always been a natural inclination of mine to see stories told as well as they can be. And one area this is especially true for is dialogue. Now, I'm not one to sing my own praises, but I've always believed that was one field I was pretty good in, though really I would just try to mimic how people talk in real life. My point is, though, that if I hear dialogue spoken in a movie that's obviously wooden or something nobody would ever actually say, I usually have a mental compulsion to fix it in my head to make it sound more natural. So, as you can imagine, yes, the Star Wars prequels are a blast for me to watch. But surprisingly enough, it isn't any of those movies I want to talk about today, as I've actually had a pretty easy time fixing a lot more of the awkward lines, if not always perfectly. In fact, there's only ever been one piece of dialogue that's ever left me at a complete loss as to how to fix it, which I'm going to get into in 1 second. But not before I give my usual warning that minor spoilers for the movie in question may abound. So, in case you don't want anything ruined, you might just want to be on the lookout. Alright, so let's get into it. Okay, so just to be crystal clear, I'm not saying that this is actually the worst, most absolutely horrid piece of dialogue out there. What I am saying is that this is the only time I haven't been able to mentally fix a line of dialogue spoken in a movie. Because I'm sure there are lines much worse than this out there. But as of this writing, I can honestly say that I've never been left more stumped as to how to fix a line and make it workable from how it's presented in the context of the movie. And since I believe I've kept you all waiting long enough, the movie in question is the 1952 drama The Snows of Kilimanjaro. Based on the short story by Ernest Hemingway and starring Gregory Peck, Ava Gardner, and Susan Hayward, the line in question is spoken by Hayward a little over an hour into the movie. But just for some context first, most of the movie is told in flashbacks, and the line in question takes place during one of them. It depicts the first meeting between Peck and Hayward, whom he has just mistaken for the love of his life, played by Gardner. So, with that being said, instead of just reading the line like I usually do, I'm going to let you hear it for yourself.
Really sorry. I didn't know you.
A woman with a family? They're my brother's children. Now, why did I tell you that?
And as I said before, no matter how hard I try, I just can't make that line work without completely altering it. I mean, if it were just a woman with a family, these aren't my kids, they're my brothers, then the line would work just fine. It's the, now why did I tell you that? That makes it all fall apart. Because, at least to me, it seems quite obvious why she just told him that. And I honestly think most people would similarly correct him in the same situation. Now, the thing is, I do understand why that line was put in, because the two later go on to marry each other. But the thing is, you know they're husband and wife 5 minutes after the movie starts. So the fact that they're trying to foreshadow a future relationship between the two an hour after the audience already knows it's a foregone conclusion is really unnecessary, especially with it being handled so clumsily. But to get back to the line itself, I don't blame Hayward's delivery at all, since it's obvious she's doing the best she can, and I honestly think it would have been virtually impossible to make that line work, no matter who was delivering it. Because an important thing to remember here is, most people don't go, "Why did I tell you that?" out loud. They may think it all the time, but 99 times out of 100, they don't actually say it. And when they do, it's usually more in the great, now we're in trouble kind of way. Like, for example, say somebody's in a hardware store trying to turn on an electric saw to see how it works. And while he's having trouble, his wayward friend goes, "No, Hank, this is the on switch." At which point he gets it working, and his friend immediately goes, "Why did I just tell you that?" Because he's convinced he's going to break something with it. In a situation like that, it makes sense that somebody would say that out loud. Really, the only other time, and I guess you could argue that this is closer to in the movie, is if somebody blurts out something embarrassing or weird about themselves without thinking. To use another example, let's say a jogger is running down the street and sees a guy seemingly smashing his hand with a hammer against a mailbox. So he goes running up to him and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And the man with the hammer says, "Just fixing my mailbox," before revealing that he was only hammering some nails into place that he couldn't see. So then the jogger sighs and says, "Oh, okay. I thought you were hitting your hand with the hammer." And the other man laughs and says, in complete seriousness, "No, it's my thumb I like to smash sometimes," before freezing up and saying, uh, "Why did I just say that?" At which point the jogger gives him a weird look and continues on with his day. Now, please forgive me if that's a rather odd example and a pretty bad one to boot, but I'm just trying to demonstrate that in a case like that, it also makes a lot more sense why he would say that out loud, because obviously he wouldn't want anybody else to know that. Telling somebody, even if it's a stranger, that you aren't the parent of the children you're with isn't something that you'd think most people would feel awkward about having just said. As I said before, there's no reason for her to say that other than for the writers to try and convey to the audience that she finds him attractive and is letting him know that she's not tied down. Because I'm telling you, most people under similar circumstances would have never said that out loud, even if they were thinking it in their head. But I think I've gone on long enough about that. My whole point here is I've never been able to come up with a way to change those lines without either removing them completely or changing the whole conversation around. And as I said before, that isn't usual for me. But seriously, if I were hired as a script doctor for this movie and told to help tighten up the script, those lines would leave me at a genuine loss for what to do. Really, the closest I've come to fixing it was to just remove that third line entirely and maybe keep the second one a bit more vague. But even then, it's far from perfect, and I do usually like to keep the lines, or at least the context or idea behind them, more intact than that. So all I can really say at this point is, if any of you think you can fix those lines better than that, please feel free to leave a comment below because I am at a loss for how to fix it. Honestly, I'm surprised such a clunky and awkward line made it into the final cut of the movie, considering it had some pretty big names for its time, both in front of and behind the camera. Alright, that's all I've got. I guess there really wasn't much to say about this. So now please let me know what you think. What's the worst piece of dialogue you've ever heard? How does it compare to the one in this video? Please feel free to tell me about it in the comments below. And again, if you think you've got a good way to fix that line, don't hesitate to post a comment for that either, as I'm really anxious to see if anybody can come up with something good, or at least something better than I could come up with. And as I've already said, plenty of times before, you don't have to agree with anything I've said in this video. And I'm also not saying that the line is the worst dialogue in existence. Just that it's the one I've had the most problems trying to fix. Thank you all for watching. It is all very greatly appreciated. And I hope to see you all next time.